I was standing in front of my full-length mirror, fastening the clasp of my pearl necklace when my phone rang. It was a Friday evening, 6:30 exactly, and I had precisely 30 minutes before I needed to leave for dinner at Dominic's house in Brooklyn Heights. The pearls had been a gift from Thomas on our 20th anniversary, smooth and cool against my skin, and I always wore them to family dinners. They made me feel close to him, even though he'd been gone for 6 years now. The ringtone was Miles Drummond's, my attorney. I felt my stomach tighten immediately because Miles never called outside business hours. Never. In the 11 years he'd been handling my legal affairs, first helping me navigate the sale of my boutique chain, and then managing my estate planning, he'd been meticulously professional about boundaries. A Friday evening call meant something was wrong. I picked up on the second ring. "Miles? Is everything all right?" His voice came through shaky, almost breathless. "Linnea, don't go to that house. Please. I need you to come to my office right now. It's about Gemma. I've discovered something, and you need to know about it before that dinner happens." My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, at the woman in the elegant navy dress, perfectly styled silver blonde hair, tasteful makeup that I'd spent 40 minutes applying. I looked put together, confident, exactly like the successful businesswoman I'd spent 30 years becoming. But inside, I felt my composure cracking. "Miles, what are you talking about? I'm supposed to be there in half an hour. Dominic is expecting me. Felix has been talking about this dinner all week." I know. His voice was urgent in a way I'd never heard before. "But Linnea, you cannot walk into that house tonight without knowing what I've found. This is serious. This is about protecting you, protecting your relationship with your son. Please, trust me. Come to the office." I felt dizzy. Miles knew how much I loved my son, how much I adored my 3-year-old grandson Felix. He knew that every decision I'd made since Thomas died had been about building a family, about making sure Dominic and his family were secure and happy. He would never interfere with a family dinner unless it was absolutely critical. My hands were shaking as I reached back to unclasp the necklace. I'm on my way. I grabbed my purse, a Chanel bag that had been one of my last purchases before I retired, and rushed out of my apartment. The doorman hailed me a taxi, and as I slid into the back seat, I tried calling Dominic. It went straight to voicemail. I left a message, keeping my voice as steady as I could manage. "Honey, it's Mom. I'm running late. Something came up last minute. I'll be there as soon as I can. Kiss Felix for me." The taxi crawled through Manhattan traffic, and every red light felt like torture. My mind was racing, spiraling through possibilities. What could Gemma have done? My daughter-in-law had always been polite to me, always smiling with those perfect white teeth, always posting those carefully curated photos on Instagram of her perfect life, her perfect son, her perfect marriage. But there had always been something about her that made me uneasy, something I could never quite name. A coldness in her eyes that didn't match her smile, a calculation in the way she watched me whenever I spent time with Felix. I'd tried so hard to ignore those feelings. I'd told myself I was being unfair, that I was just a mother who didn't think anyone was good enough for her son. When Dominic announced they were getting married after only 8 months of dating, I'd bitten my tongue and smiled and written the check for their dream wedding. When they'd struggled to afford a house, I'd bought them the Brooklyn Heights brownstone, $2.3 million, because I wanted my son to be happy. I wanted my grandson to grow up in a beautiful home. I wanted to be the kind of mother and grandmother who supported her family. But lately, things had been different. Dominic had been distant, canceling our weekly lunches, cutting phone calls short. When I visited, Gemma always seemed to have a reason why I needed to leave early. Felix had an appointment. They had plans. Dominic was tired. Always something. And my son, my sweet boy who had always confided in me about everything, had stopped looking me in the eye. The taxi finally pulled up in front of Miles's office building in Midtown. I paid the driver and hurried inside, my heels clicking against the marble lobby floor. The building was mostly empty on a Friday evening, the usual corporate buzz replaced by an eerie quiet. I took the elevator to the 14th floor, and Miles was waiting for me in the reception area when the doors opened. He looked terrible. His normally composed face was pale, His tie loosened, his eyes filled with something that looked like genuine fear. "Thank you for coming," he said, ushering me quickly into his office. His desk was covered with documents, folders, printouts. He closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. I sank into the leather chair across from his desk, gripping my purse in my lap like a lifeline. "Miles, please, you're scaring me." "What is this about?" He sat down heavily and pulled a thick manila folder toward him. 3 days ago, my assistant Jennifer came to me with something disturbing. Her cousin works as a paralegal at Whitmore and Associates, a law firm that specializes in elder law and estate disputes. The cousin mentioned casually that they had a new client, a young woman building a case about undue influence and financial manipulation by a family member. I felt my breath catch. What does this have to do with me? The cousin didn't give names, but she described the situation. A woman in her late 20s claiming her wealthy mother-in-law was using money to control the family, that the mother-in-law was exhibiting signs of declining judgment, that she needed to be protected from making poor financial decisions. Miles looked at me with something close to anguish. Jennifer put it together. "She knows I represent you. She knows about your family situation." She asked her cousin for more details, discreetly. He opened the folder and pulled out several pages. "Linnea, Gemma hired a private investigator 3 months ago to dig into your finances. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, property holdings, everything. She also consulted with this attorney about building a case for undue influence and potential elder abuse." The words hit me like a physical blow. Elder abuse? I'm 57 years old. I'm not elderly. I'm not declining. I sold my business 3 years ago, and I've managed my investments perfectly well. This is insane. "I know," Miles said quietly, "but Gemma is building a narrative. She's preparing to paint you as a controlling, manipulative mother-in-law who uses financial leverage to dominate her son's life. And she's looking for legal grounds to challenge your estate planning decisions." My throat was tight. "How did you get all this information?" Miles hesitated. Jennifer's cousin felt uncomfortable about the case. Some of the tactics Gemma's attorney was suggesting seemed unethical to her. "When Jennifer explained that you were my client, that you were a good person who'd been generous to your family, the cousin provided us with copies of some preliminary documents. She could lose her job for this, Linnea, but she felt you deserved to know what was being planned." He slid several papers across the desk to me. I picked them up with trembling hands. There were bank statements, summaries of my assets, notes about my donations to various charities, my plans to establish scholarship funds in Thomas's name. Someone had gone through my entire financial life with a microscope. "She knows about the 40%, I whispered. Miles nodded grimly. "She knows you're planning to leave 40% of your estate to charitable causes, and she sees that as theft from Dominic's inheritance." I felt sick. After Thomas died, I'd spent months thinking about his legacy, about what he would have wanted. My husband had been passionate about education, about giving opportunities to young people who couldn't afford them. Setting aside a significant portion of my estate for scholarships and educational programs had felt like the right way to honor him. Dominic would still inherit millions. He would be more than comfortable. But Gemma apparently saw things differently. "There's more," Miles said, his voice dropping. "And this is the part that made me call you tonight." He picked up his phone and tapped the screen several times, then turned it toward me. Jennifer's cousin recorded this. It was an accidental pocket dial from Gemma's phone to her friend's phone. The friend saved it and sent it to Gemma, but it was also automatically backed up to a cloud service that the cousin had access to as part of her paralegal work on the case. He pressed play. I heard background noise, the sound of someone moving around, and then Gemma's voice, clear and unmistakable. "No, seriously, Emily, tonight is perfect. I've been planning this for weeks. The dinner at our house, Dominic cooking his mother's favorite meal, Felix all cute in his new outfit. I'm going to set the stage, make everything look Instagram perfect, and then I'm going to bring up the inheritance conversation." Another voice, presumably Emily. "Are you sure that's a good idea? Dominic gets so uncomfortable when you talk about his mom's money." Gemma laughed, and it was a sound I'd never heard from her before. Cold, calculated. "That's exactly why I'm doing it in front of her. I've got the whole script planned. I'm going to start gentle, talk about Felix's future, college funds, security. Then I'm going to mention how generous she is with everyone else, all those charities, all those strangers getting Thomas's legacy while her actual grandson gets the leftovers. I'm going to push her buttons until she loses it. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Miles reached across the desk and steadied it for me, but he didn't stop the recording. "And you're sure she'll lose it?" Emily's voice asked. "Oh, she will. I've been setting this up for months." All those little comments to Dominic about how his mom treats him like a child, how she uses money to control our choices, how she's always inserting herself into our parenting decisions. He's already starting to see it. Tonight, when she snaps at me in front of him, it's going to confirm everything I've been saying, and I'll have it all on video. "You're going to record it?" My phone will be in my pocket, recording everything. When she explodes, when she says something cruel or controlling or inappropriate, I'll have proof. Dominic will finally see what I see. And then we can start talking seriously about getting early access to that inheritance before she gives it all away to her precious charity cases. The recording ended. I sat there in Miles's office, frozen, feeling like the world had tilted on its axis. This woman, the mother of my grandson, the wife my son loved, had been systematically planning to manipulate me, to destroy my relationship with Dominic, to paint me as some kind of villain in my own family's story. "She's been poisoning him against me," I whispered. "All those canceled lunches, all those short visits. She's been in his ear for months, hasn't she?" Miles nodded. "The paralegal found notes from Gemma's conversations with her attorney. She's been documenting everything. Every gift you've given, every suggestion you've made about Felix's care, every time you've offered financial help. She's been reframing all of it as control and manipulation. She's building a case to isolate you from your son." I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I'd built a multi-million-dollar business from scratch. I'd survived losing the love of my life. I'd raised a son alone after Thomas died. I was not going to fall apart in my attorney's office. "What does she want?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Money, control. She has secret debts, Linnea, credit card debt she's hidden from Dominic, $67,000 spent maintaining her Instagram lifestyle. She's drowning financially while pretending to be this wellness influencer living a perfect life. She needs access to your money, and she's willing to destroy your family to get it." I looked at Miles, at this man who had been my trusted advisor for over a decade, who had just saved me from walking into an ambush designed to devastate me. "What do I do?" He leaned forward, his expression intense. "We prepare. You're going to that dinner, but you're going in with your eyes open. I'm giving you a recording device to keep in your purse. More importantly, I'm teaching you how to stay calm, no matter what she says or does. Don't give her what she wants, Linnea. Don't give her the explosive reaction she's planning to capture. Let her reveal herself. Let Dominic see who he really married." I sat in Miles's office for another 20 minutes while he walked me through techniques for staying calm under provocation. Breathing exercises, mental anchors, ways to redirect conversation without appearing defensive. He gave me a small recording device that looked like a simple keychain and showed me how to activate it discreetly. Then I called Dominic again and left another message saying I'd be there soon, just running late with an unexpected business matter. The taxi ride to Brooklyn Heights gave me time to think, to remember how I'd gotten here. How had I become the villain in my own family's story? 6 years ago, my world ended on a rainy Tuesday in October. Thomas had been driving home from a consultation meeting with a client in Connecticut. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel and crossed the median on I-95. My husband of 28 years died instantly. He was 53 years old. We were supposed to have decades left together. We'd been planning a trip to Italy for our 30th anniversary. We'd talked about grandchildren, about growing old together, about all the dreams we'd worked so hard to build. Dominic was 26 when his father died. He'd just started his position at the consulting firm, finally financially independent after years of student loans and entry-level positions. He was devastated. We both were. Thomas had been his hero, his mentor, the person he called when he needed advice about everything from career decisions to car repairs. Losing him left a hole in both our lives that felt impossible to fill. I threw myself into work. It was the only thing that made sense, the only place where I had control. My boutique chain had been my pride and joy for 25 years. I'd started with a single shop in Soho when Dominic was 7 years old, selling carefully curated European designer pieces to New York women who wanted elegance without the Madison Avenue price tags. Thomas had encouraged me every step of the way, even when we mortgaged our apartment to finance the second location. He'd believed in me when I barely believed in myself. Over 2 decades, I'd grown that single shop into a chain of 23 locations across the Northeast. I knew every manager by name. I knew which locations needed more attention, which ones were thriving, where the market was shifting. The business had been Thomas's and my shared dream, even though it was my name on the paperwork. Every decision we'd made together. After he died, I expanded aggressively. It was grief channeled into ambition. Within 2 years, I'd opened 7 more locations and caught the attention of a major retail investment group. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. $18 million for the entire chain. I was 53 years old, suddenly wealthy beyond anything Thomas and I had ever imagined, and completely alone. Dominic tried to be there for me. He called every day. He came over for dinners. He held me when I cried, which was often in those first 2 years. But he had his own life, his own grief to process. I couldn't burden him with the depth of my loneliness. So I smiled and told him I was fine, and invested my money wisely, and tried to figure out what my life was supposed to look like without the man I'd loved since I was 24 years old. Then, 3 years ago, Dominic called me with excitement in his voice that I hadn't heard since before Thomas died. He'd met someone. Her name was Gemma. She was beautiful, smart, passionate about health and wellness. They'd met at a charity gala where she was working as a brand ambassador for some organic skincare company. He was smitten. I met her 2 weeks later at a brunch Dominic arranged at a cafe in the West Village. She was stunning, I had to admit. Blonde hair that caught the sunlight, bright blue eyes, a smile that belonged in toothpaste commercials. She wore expensive athleisure and talked enthusiastically about clean eating and mindfulness and building her social media presence. She had 140,000 Instagram followers, she told me proudly. She was an influencer. I tried to like her. I really did. Dominic was glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. He touched her hand constantly. He laughed at her jokes. He looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd ever had. And I wanted my son to be happy, more than I wanted anything else in the world. But something felt off. When Dominic wasn't looking, Gemma's smile would slip just slightly. Her eyes would get this calculating expression, especially when conversation turned to anything involving money or property or family finances. When I mentioned the scholarship fund I was considering establishing in Thomas's name, she'd change the subject immediately. When I talked about investing in Dominic's future, maybe helping him start his own consulting practice, she'd asked very specific questions about how much I was planning to contribute. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was being the overprotective mother who didn't think anyone was good enough for her baby boy. Thomas would have told me to give her a chance, to trust Dominic's judgment. So I swallowed my concerns and smiled through the engagement party and wrote a generous check for the wedding. They got married 8 months after they met. It was a beautiful ceremony in the Hamptons, 300 guests, everything Gemma had pinned on her Pinterest boards brought to life. I watched my son say his vows and saw genuine love in his eyes, and I thought maybe I'd been wrong about her. Maybe she did love him. Maybe my instincts were just colored by grief and loneliness. 2 years later, Felix was born. 3 weeks early but healthy, 7 pounds and 4 ounces of absolute perfection. When they placed him in my arms for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Here was a piece of Thomas, continuing forward. Here was hope and future and family. I'd been so lost since my husband died, but holding my grandson made me feel anchored again. I wanted to be the best grandmother possible. I bought them a house because their apartment was too small for a baby. A beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn Heights with 4 bedrooms and a backyard. $2.3 million. I furnished the nursery. I paid for the night nurse for the first 3 months. I set up a college fund for Felix that would ensure he could attend any university he wanted. Gemma thanked me effusively. She posted photos of the house on Instagram, talking about how blessed she was, how grateful. But there was always that edge in her voice when she spoke to me privately. that slight coldness that made me feel like my generosity was somehow an imposition rather than a gift. Over the next 3 years, I tried to be present without being overbearing. I babysat when they needed date nights. I took Felix to the park. I read him stories and bought him educational toys and showed up for every birthday party and holiday. But Gemma was always there, monitoring, managing, subtly controlling how much time I got with my grandson. At first, it was little things. "Oh, Linnea, you're spoiling him with all those gifts. Linnea, we're trying to limit screen time, so maybe don't let him watch videos on your phone. Linnea, we have a specific nap schedule. You can't just keep him up because you're enjoying time with him." Then it became bigger things. Visits that got cut short for vague reasons. Plans that got canceled last minute. And Dominic, my sweet boy, started pulling away. Our weekly lunch tradition became monthly, then sporadic. He stopped calling to tell me about his day. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd say he was just busy with work, with Felix, with life. But I could feel the distance growing between us like a physical thing. I blamed myself. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I was overstepping boundaries. Maybe Gemma was right, and I was being controlling without meaning to be. I started pulling back, giving them space, trying to be the kind of mother-in-law who didn't create problems. But the distance just kept growing. 3 months ago, I'd had lunch with my financial advisor to discuss my estate planning. I wanted to honor Thomas's legacy. He'd been so passionate about education, about helping kids who didn't have the advantages we'd been able to give Dominic. We'd always talked about establishing scholarships someday when we had the resources. Now I had the resources, and it felt like the right thing to do. I decided to leave 40% of my estate to a foundation that would fund scholarships for underprivileged students pursuing architecture, Thomas's field. The remaining 60% would go to Dominic, held in a trust until he turned 40, to protect him from making impulsive decisions if something happened to me prematurely. It was still millions of dollars. My son would never want for anything. I didn't tell Dominic about the details yet. I wanted to have everything properly structured first. But somehow, Gemma had found out. Somehow, she'd discovered my plans and decided they were a betrayal, an act of theft against her family. The taxi pulled up in front of their brownstone. The house I'd bought them. The home where my grandson was growing up. The place where my daughter-in-law was planning to ambush me with a carefully orchestrated scene designed to make me look like the monster she'd been telling my son I was. I paid the driver and sat in the back seat for a moment, looking at the warm lights glowing in the windows. I could see movement inside, shadows passing by. My family, the only family I had left. Miles's words echoed in my head. "Don't give her what she wants. Stay calm. Let her reveal herself." I touched the recording device in my purse, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the taxi. I walked up the front steps I'd climbed 100 times before, and rang the doorbell. I could hear Felix squealing with excitement inside. "Grandma! Grandma's here!" The door opened, and there was Gemma, perfect as always, in a white designer dress, her hair in an artfully messy bun, her smile bright and welcoming. "Linnea, we were getting worried about you. Come in, come in." She hugged me, and I smelled her expensive perfume, felt her thin arms around my shoulders. To anyone watching, it would have looked like a warm greeting between family members. But I felt the tension in her body, the calculation in the way she pulled back and studied my face. "I'm so sorry I'm late," I said, keeping my voice light and pleasant. "Last-minute business issue. You know how it is." "Of course," Gemma said, her smile never wavering. "Dominic is just finishing up in the kitchen. Felix has been asking for you non-stop." I walked into the house, into the trap that had been set for me, with my eyes wide open and my recording device ready. Whatever happened tonight, I was not going to be the villain in this story, not anymore. Felix came barreling down the hallway the moment he heard my voice, his little legs pumping as fast as they could carry him. "Grandma, Grandma, I missed you so much." I caught him in my arms and lifted him up, breathing in that sweet child smell of shampoo and innocence. This was why I was here. This was what mattered. Not Gemma's schemes or her poisonous plans. This little boy who loved me unconditionally, who lit up when he saw me, who still called me every Sunday morning just to tell me about his week. "I missed you too, sweetheart. Have you been good for Mommy and Daddy?" "So good. Daddy is making your favorite dinner. He said you love his chicken piccata more than anything." I kissed his forehead and set him down, keeping hold of his hand as Gemma led us toward the kitchen. The house smelled amazing, garlic and lemon and white wine, scents that reminded me of the countless dinners Thomas and I had hosted when Dominic was young. My son had learned to cook from his father, standing on a step stool at the counter while Thomas taught him how to dice onions and to glaze a pan. Dominic was at the stove when we entered the kitchen, and my heart squeezed seeing him there. 32 years old, the image of his father with those same green eyes, that same careful concentration when he cooked. He looked up and smiled when he saw me, a genuine smile that made me want to cry. "Mom, finally!" I was about to send out a search party. I walked over and hugged him, and for a moment, just a moment, everything felt normal. This was my boy, my son, who I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for. No matter what Gemma was planning, nothing could change that fundamental bond between us. "Sorry, honey. Work thing. But I'm here now, and it smells incredible. 15 more minutes and we'll be ready to eat. Go sit down, relax. You look tired." There it was. The first hint of what Gemma had been planting. Dominic never used to comment on how I looked, never used to suggest I seemed worn down or tired. But now, apparently, that was a concern. Poor Linnea, looking her age, showing signs of decline. Gemma touched my elbow, guiding me toward the dining room. "Come on, Linnea. I've set everything up beautifully. Felix helped me fold the napkins. Didn't you, baby?" Felix nodded enthusiastically, running ahead of us to show me his handiwork. The dining table was indeed set beautifully, with the china I'd given them as a wedding present. Candles flickering in crystal holders, fresh flowers in the centerpiece. It looked like a spread from one of Gemma's Instagram posts. Perfect, curated, staged. I sat down in the chair Gemma indicated, and she poured me a glass of white wine from an expensive bottle, probably something I'd sent them for a special occasion, now being deployed as part of the evening's carefully orchestrated performance. "So," Gemma said, settling into her own chair with Felix climbing onto her lap, "tell us about this work emergency. I didn't realize you still had business commitments. Isn't retirement supposed to be about relaxing?" Her tone was light, conversational, but I caught the subtle dig, the implication that I should be winding down, stepping back, not involving myself in anything that required sharp decision-making, setting the stage for her narrative about declining judgment. "Just estate planning stuff," I said casually, taking a sip of wine. "Making sure everything is organized properly. It's important to have your affairs in order at any age." "Oh, absolutely." Gemma's smile widened. "It's so responsible of you. I've been thinking a lot about that lately, actually. About planning for the future, about making sure Felix has security." Here we go, I thought. She's starting earlier than I expected. Dominic came in carrying a platter of chicken, the piccata sauce glistening under the dining room lights. He set it down in the center of the table, followed by dishes of roasted vegetables and creamy polenta. "All right, family, let's eat." The first part of dinner was pleasant enough. Felix chattered about his preschool, about a friend named Marcus who could do a handstand, about a butterfly he'd seen in the backyard. Dominic told me about a new client his firm had signed, a major account that would mean more responsibility for him. I listened and asked questions and tried to ignore the way Gemma watched me over the rim of her wine glass, studying me like I was a specimen under a microscope. But I could feel it building. The tension underneath the pleasant surface. Gemma was waiting for her moment, choosing her entry point carefully. She'd scripted this, after all. She knew exactly what she wanted to say and when she wanted to say it. It came during dessert. Dominic had made tiramisu, Thomas's favorite, and as we were eating it, Gemma leaned back in her chair and said, "Linnea, there's something Dominic and I have been wanting to discuss with you, about Felix's future." Dominic looked uncomfortable immediately. "Gemma, maybe this isn't the best time." "No, honey, it's important. Your mother is here. We're all together as a family. It's the perfect time." She turned to me, her expression earnest and concerned. "Linnea, you know how much we appreciate everything you've done for us. The house, Felix's school, all your generous gifts. We're so grateful." I waited. Here came the but. "But Dominic and I have been thinking about long-term security for Felix. College is getting so expensive, and we want to make sure he has opportunities, that he's taken care of no matter what happens. He will be, I said simply. I've set up a college fund for him. It's more than sufficient for any university he chooses. That's wonderful, Gemma said, and her smile didn't reach her eyes. But it's not just about college, is it? It's about his whole future, his inheritance, the legacy that should be passed down through the family. Dominic put down his fork. Gemma, we talked about this. I know we did, but your mother should hear our concerns. She should know how we feel. Gemma's voice had taken on a slight edge, just enough to seem passionate rather than aggressive. Linnea, we've heard that you're planning to leave a significant portion of your estate to charity, to strangers, to scholarship programs for people who aren't even your family. I felt my pulse quicken, but I kept my face neutral. Where did you hear that? Does it matter? Is it true? I set down my own fork very carefully. My estate planning is my private business, Gemma. But since you've apparently made it your business, yes, I'm planning to establish a foundation in Thomas's name. He was passionate about education, about helping young people who don't have the advantages we've had. I think it's a fitting way to honor his memory. At the expense of your grandson? Gemma's voice rose slightly. You're going to give millions of dollars to strangers while your own flesh and blood gets whatever's left over? Gemma, stop. Dominic's voice was firm now. This isn't appropriate. Mom's money is her money. She can do whatever she wants with it. Can she, though? When her decisions affect our family? When she's essentially taking Felix's inheritance and giving it away to prove some point about charity? Gemma turned to Dominic, her eyes wide and wounded. Your father worked hard his whole life. That money came from both of them building a business together. Don't you think your dad would want it to stay in the family? To take care of his grandson? I felt a flash of anger at the mention of Thomas, at Gemma presuming to know what my husband would have wanted. But I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. This was exactly what she wanted. She wanted me to snap, to say something harsh, to prove I was the controlling, irrational person she'd been telling Dominic I was. Thomas and I discussed this extensively before he died, I said quietly. We both agreed that when we had the means, we wanted to help others, to give back. Dominic will inherit millions of dollars, Gemma. He'll be more than comfortable. This isn't about taking anything away from him or from Felix. Isn't it, though? Gemma leaned forward, and I could see the calculation in her eyes, even as her voice dripped with concern. You say Dominic will inherit millions, but you've also set up some kind of trust, haven't you? So he won't actually have access to his own inheritance until he's 40 years old? Like he's a child who can't be trusted with money? Dominic's face went pale. How do you know about the trust? Gemma waved her hand dismissively. That's not the point. The point is, your mother is treating you like you're incompetent, like you can't make your own financial decisions. She's controlling you from beyond the grave, Dominic. That's not what the trust is for, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. It's a standard estate planning tool. It protects the inheritance from what? From Dominic using his own money however he chooses? From him taking care of his family the way he sees fit? Gemma's voice was getting louder now, more aggressive. Face it, Linnea. You use money to control people. You bought us this house so you'd always have leverage over where we live. You pay for Felix's school so you can have a say in his education. Every gift comes with strings attached. That's not true, I said, but my voice wavered slightly. Because wasn't there a kernel of truth in what she was saying? Hadn't I sometimes wondered if my generosity was buying me access to my grandson? I've never tried to control you or Dominic. I just wanted to help. Help? Or insert yourself into every aspect of our lives? Gemma stood up, and I realized with a sinking feeling that she was building to her climax. This was the moment she'd been planning. You know what I think, Linnea? I think you're lonely. I think you lost your husband, and you can't handle the fact that your son has his own family now. So you use your money to force your way into our lives, to make us dependent on you, to ensure we can never break free. Gemma, that's enough! Dominic stood up too, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You need to stop. Now. No, I don't need to stop. Someone has to say this. Someone has to protect our family from her manipulation. Gemma turned back to me, and there was triumph in her eyes. She thought she had me. She thought I was about to explode. You want to know what's really going on here, Linnea? You're clinging to control because you're terrified of becoming irrelevant. You're getting older, you're alone, and the thought of us living our lives without you dictating every move scares you to death. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Not because her words were true, but because they were designed to hurt, designed to provoke exactly the kind of emotional breakdown she could capture on whatever recording device she had hidden in her pocket. I could see Felix's confused, frightened face. I could see Dominic torn between his wife and his mother. I could see the trap closing around me. But then I thought about Miles's words. Don't give her what she wants. Stay calm. Let her reveal herself. I stood up slowly, deliberately. I picked up my wine glass and took a sip, buying myself a moment to compose my thoughts. When I spoke, my voice was quiet, but steady. Gemma, I'm sorry you feel that way. I genuinely am. It was never my intention to make you feel controlled or manipulated. If my generosity has somehow been misconstrued as an attempt to dominate your lives, then I apologize for not communicating my intentions more clearly. I could see the frustration flash across her face. This wasn't the reaction she wanted. She needed me angry, defensive, attacking. Instead, I was calm, reasonable, dignified. However, I continued, I want to address something you said. You mentioned that I'm treating Dominic like a child by setting up a trust. The trust is actually a standard practice recommended by my attorney to protect the inheritance from potential creditors, divorce settlements, or impulsive financial decisions made during grief. It's not about control, it's about protection. Dominic was staring at me now, really looking at me for the first time in months. I could see the wheels turning in his head, questioning perhaps for the first time whether everything Gemma had been telling him was accurate. And as for the charitable foundation, I said, you're right that it represents a significant portion of my estate, 40% to be exact. But Dominic will still inherit over $10 million, even with the foundation fully funded. That's more money than most people see in 3 lifetimes. It's hardly leaving him destitute. 10 million? Dominic's voice was barely a whisper. Mom, I had no idea. Because I haven't discussed the specifics with you yet. I wanted to wait until everything was properly structured. But since Gemma seems to have obtained this information through some other means, I suppose now is as good a time as any to be transparent. I turned to look directly at Gemma, and I let her see that I knew. I let her see in my eyes that I understood exactly what she was doing, what she'd been planning, what kind of person she really was underneath that carefully curated exterior. I'm curious, Gemma. How did you find out about my estate planning? Those documents are confidential. The only people who should have access to that information are myself, my attorney, and my financial advisor. So how did you learn about the trust and the foundation? She faltered for just a moment, and I saw panic flicker across her face. I don't remember exactly. You must have mentioned it at some point. I didn't. I never discussed any of this with you, or even with Dominic yet. So I'll ask again. How did you obtain private information about my financial affairs? The room went very quiet. Felix had stopped eating his tiramisu and was watching us with wide, worried eyes. Dominic was looking at his wife with an expression I couldn't quite read. Confusion, suspicion. Something was shifting. Gemma recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. Does it matter? The point is you're making decisions that affect our family without consulting us. You're giving away Dominic's inheritance. It's not Dominic's inheritance until I'm dead, I said, and my voice had steel in it now. While I'm alive, it's my money, money that I earned. Money that Thomas and I built together over 30 years of hard work. And I will decide how to distribute it, just as you will decide how to distribute whatever wealth you accumulate in your lifetime. That's exactly the kind of controlling attitude I'm talking about, Gemma said. But there was desperation in her voice now. Her carefully scripted scene was falling apart. You think because you have money, you get to make all the decisions. You don't even consider how your choices affect us. I've considered it extensively, I said. And I've concluded that leaving my son $10 million plus this house, plus the college fund I've already established for Felix, is more than generous. If you're concerned about your family's financial security, perhaps you should examine your own spending habits rather than counting money that isn't even yours yet. I saw Dominic's head snap toward Gemma. What does she mean by that? Gemma's face went white. Nothing. She doesn't know what she's talking about. But I did know. Thanks to Miles and his assistant, and that brave paralegal who'd risked her job to warn me. I knew about the credit card debt, the secret accounts, the desperate maintaining of an Instagram lifestyle that Gemma couldn't actually afford. And I was about to reveal it all. "Dominic," I said gently, "when was the last time you looked at your credit report?" My son frowned. "I don't know. Maybe a year ago? Why?" "You might want to check it again. Specifically, you might want to look for any accounts that you don't remember opening." Gemma made a small, strangled sound. "Linnea, don't you dare!" "Don't I dare what? Tell my son the truth? Isn't that what you've been claiming to want? Honesty? Transparency?" I kept my eyes on Dominic. "Your wife has been living beyond her means for quite some time. She's accumulated significant debt maintaining her social media presence. And based on what I've learned, at least some of that debt is in accounts bearing your name." "That's a lie!" Gemma's voice was shrill now, all pretense of calm gone. "You're making things up because you can't handle being called out on your controlling behavior." "Am I? Then you won't mind if Dominic pulls his credit report right now and checks." I pulled out my phone. "In fact, I have the contact information for a credit monitoring service. We can get the report within minutes." Dominic was already reaching for his own phone. "Gemma, what is she talking about? What debt?" "It's nothing, honey. Just some credit cards. Every household has some credit card debt. It's completely normal." But Gemma's hands were shaking, and I could see sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool temperature in the dining room. "How much debt?" Dominic's voice was hard now. "I don't know. I'd have to check." "How much?" Gemma's composure finally shattered completely. "It's not my fault. Do you know what it costs to maintain a following? The clothes, the products, the lifestyle content? I have 180,000 followers, Dominic. That's a business. That's an investment in our future. The debt is temporary. Once I monetize properly." "How much, Gemma?" She was crying now, mascara starting to run. 67,000. But it's not what you think. I was going to pay it off once we got access to... She stopped abruptly, realizing what she'd almost said. Once we got access to my money. Once she'd successfully manipulated the situation to force an early distribution of the inheritance. Once she'd isolated me from my son and convinced him that I was the problem. Dominic looked like he'd been punched. $67,000? And you opened accounts in my name? Just 2. And it was only because my credit was maxed out. I was going to tell you. I was going to pay it back. With what money, Gemma? We live on my salary. Everything else comes from my mother's generosity. Generosity, you've been telling me, is actually manipulation. I watched my daughter-in-law fall apart in real time, and I felt no satisfaction. Only sadness. Sadness that it had come to this. Sadness that my son had been deceived. Sadness that little Felix was witnessing his parents' marriage implode over a dinner table. "Dominic," Gemma grabbed his arm, "please, let me explain. Your mother is twisting everything. She's the one who's been investigating me, violating my privacy. Can't you see what she's doing? She's trying to come between us." But Dominic pulled his arm away. He looked at me, and I saw my little boy in his eyes, the child who used to crawl into my lap when he was scared, the teenager who called me first when he got accepted to college, the young man who'd sobbed in my arms when his father died. "Mom," he said quietly, "how do you know all this?" And that was when I took out my phone and played the recording Miles had given me. The pocket dial conversation. Gemma's voice filling the dining room, clear and damning. "I'm going to push her buttons until she loses it. I'm going to bring up the inheritance conversation. When she snaps at me in front of him, it's going to confirm everything I've been saying. My phone will be in my pocket, recording everything. Then we can start talking seriously about getting early access to that inheritance." The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Felix started crying softly, not understanding what was happening, but feeling the tension, the devastation, the complete destruction of whatever fragile peace this family had maintained. Gemma stood frozen, her face a mask of horror and rage. She looked at me with pure hatred, and I looked back with something closer to pity. Because I'd won, but winning felt hollow when it meant my son's marriage was destroyed and my grandson's home was broken. "Get out," Dominic said, and for a moment I wasn't sure if he was talking to me or to Gemma. But then he looked at his wife, and his voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. "Pack a bag. Go stay with your mother or your friend Emily or whoever. But you're not sleeping in this house tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." Gemma started to argue, started to plead, but Dominic just shook his head. "I can't even look at you right now, please. Just go." She went, stumbling out of the dining room, and I heard her running up the stairs, heard drawers opening and closing, heard the sounds of someone's life falling apart. Felix climbed into my lap, sobbing, and I held him while Dominic sank back into his chair and put his head in his hands. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." "She's been lying to me," Dominic said, his voice muffled. "For how long, Mom? How long has she been planning this?" "I don't know, honey, but it doesn't matter now. What matters is that you know the truth, and that we figure out how to move forward from here." 20 minutes later, Gemma left with a suitcase and tears streaming down her face. She didn't look at me as she walked past the dining room. She didn't kiss Felix goodbye. She just left, and the house felt strangely empty, without her poisonous presence filling it. After Gemma left, Dominic carried Felix upstairs to put him to bed. The little boy was exhausted from crying, confused and scared by what he'd witnessed. I stayed in the dining room, staring at the remains of our dinner, the half-eaten tiramisu, the wine glasses with lipstick stains on the rims, all the evidence of an evening that had started as a trap and ended as a revelation. I heard Dominic's voice drifting down from upstairs, reading Felix a bedtime story in that gentle tone fathers use when their children need comfort. The same tone Thomas had used with Dominic when he was small, when nightmares woke him or thunderstorms scared him. Some things pass from generation to generation, and tenderness is one of them. I started clearing the table, needing something to do with my hands. I carried plates to the kitchen and scraped them into the trash, watching Dominic's beautiful meal disappear into the garbage. All that effort, all that hope for a nice family evening, destroyed by Gemma's greed and manipulation. I was rinsing dishes when Dominic came back downstairs. He stood in the kitchen doorway for a long moment, just watching me. Then he said, "You don't have to do that." "I know, but I need to keep moving or I'll fall apart." He came over and took the plate from my hands, set it in the sink, and pulled me into a hug. And then we were both crying, holding each other in his kitchen, grieving for different things. He was grieving the loss of his marriage, the shattering of his trust, the realization that the woman he'd loved had been using him. I was grieving the months I'd lost with my son, the distance that had been artificially created, the fact that protecting him meant destroying his family. "I should have seen it," Dominic said when we finally pulled apart. "I should have known something was wrong." "But she was so convincing, Mom. Every time you'd leave after a visit, she'd make these little comments. Nothing obvious, just these subtle observations about how you treated me like a child, how you were always trying to control our decisions. And I started believing it. I started pulling away from you because I thought I needed to establish boundaries." "She's very good at what she does," I said quietly. "Manipulation isn't obvious when it's done skillfully. That's what makes it so dangerous." "When did you find out? About the investigation, the debt, all of it?" I told him about Miles's call, about the paralegal who'd risked her job to warn us, about the pocket dial recording that had revealed Gemma's plans for this evening. I told him how I'd almost walked into her trap, completely blind, how close I'd come to giving her exactly the explosive reaction she needed to paint me as unstable and unfit. Dominic's face hardened as I talked. "She was going to record you. She was going to make you look crazy and then use it to justify cutting you out of our lives, out of Felix's life. Yes, and the inheritance. That's what this was really about, wasn't it? Not boundaries or healthy family dynamics or any of that therapy language she was always using. It was about money." "I think so, at least partially. The debt was clearly pressing on her. She needed access to funds she didn't have." Dominic walked to the kitchen window and stared out at the dark backyard. "I gave her everything. I worked 60-hour weeks to give her the life she wanted. I supported her influencer career even when it was costing us more than it made. I let her make most of the decisions about Felix, about our home, about our future. And she still wasn't satisfied because the one thing I couldn't give her was access to your money. It's not your fault, Dominic. Isn't it? I chose her. I married her after 8 months because I was so desperate to feel something other than grief after Dad died. I ignored your concerns about her because I wanted to believe I'd found happiness. I let her drive a wedge between us because some part of me wanted to be independent, wanted to prove I didn't need my mother anymore. He turned to face me, and his eyes were red-rimmed. I'm 32 years old, and I just realized I let someone manipulate me into abandoning the one person who's always been there for me. You didn't abandon me. You were trying to build your own life. That's healthy. That's what you're supposed to do. Not at the cost of our relationship. Not based on lies someone else planted in my head. He came back to where I was standing. Mom, I need to know something. The trust fund, the 40% to charity. Would you have told me about those decisions eventually? Of course. I was planning to sit down with you next month and go over everything in detail. I wanted to have all the legal documents finalized first so I could explain it properly. The trust isn't about controlling you, Dominic. It's about protecting you. If something happens to me tomorrow, you'd inherit everything. But grief makes people vulnerable to bad decisions. The trust ensures that even if you're struggling, even if someone tries to take advantage of you, you'll have time to heal before you have full access to that kind of money. Like if I decided to give it all to a manipulative spouse to prove my love. That's not what I was thinking. But yes, that would be a scenario the trust would protect against. Dominic was quiet for a moment. And Dad, the scholarships, that was something you two had discussed? For years, your father used to say that architecture changed his life, that having someone believe in him enough to help with tuition was the reason he became who he became. He wanted to pay that forward when we could afford to. We just didn't realize it would happen because he died and I sold the business. But I think he'd be happy knowing his legacy includes helping kids who need what he once needed. He would, Dominic agreed softly. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I let Gemma poison my thinking. I'm sorry I missed lunches and cut visits short and made you feel like you weren't welcome in your own grandson's life. You were being manipulated by someone you loved. That's not your fault. But I should have been smarter. I should have questioned her narrative instead of just accepting it. You're my mother. You've never done anything but support me, love me, help me build my life. And I repaid that by pulling away because my wife told me to. I took his hands in mine. Dominic, listen to me. You are not responsible for Gemma's choices. You are not responsible for her schemes or her lies or her manipulation. What you are responsible for is what you do now, how you move forward, how you protect Felix, how you rebuild your life based on truth instead of the fiction she created. He nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks again. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to get divorced, how to explain this to Felix, how to untangle 3 years of marriage and figure out what was real and what was calculated. You do it one step at a time, and you don't do it alone. I'm here. I'll help you with whatever you need. Legal advice, emotional support, childcare while you sort everything out, whatever it takes. The house, Dominic said suddenly. You bought us this house. She's going to come after it in the divorce, isn't she? Let me worry about that. I have excellent attorneys. We'll make sure you and Felix are protected. He looked around the kitchen, at the home I'd bought them, the home where his marriage had just imploded. I don't know if I can keep living here. Every room reminds me of her, of the life I thought we had. Then we'll figure out something else. You can move closer to me, or somewhere completely new, whatever feels right for you and Felix. Closer to you sounds good, he said, and gave me a watery smile. I've missed you, Mom. I've missed our lunches and our phone calls and just knowing I could talk to you about anything. I felt so isolated these past few months. That was her goal. Isolation makes manipulation easier, but it's over now. She doesn't have that power anymore. Dominic hugged me again, holding on tight like he used to when he was little and the world felt too big and scary. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for fighting for our relationship even when I was pushing you away. I'm your mother, I said simply. Giving up was never an option. We stood there in his kitchen, in the house I'd bought, hoping to give him happiness, and I felt something shift. The fear and tension that had been coiled in my chest since Miles's phone call started to loosen. We'd survived this. My son and I had survived Gemma's schemes and come out the other side with our relationship not just intact, but stronger. The road ahead would be difficult. Divorce proceedings, custody arrangements, Felix's emotional well-being, Dominic's healing process. But we would face it together, the way families were supposed to face challenges, with honesty and support and unconditional love. Stay here tonight, Dominic said. Felix would love to wake up and find you here. And honestly, I don't want to be alone. Of course, I said. I'll take the guest room. No, that's Felix's playroom now. Take the master bedroom. I'll sleep on the couch. That bed is hers anyway. I can't imagine sleeping in it tonight. So we went upstairs together, and I helped him gather some blankets for the couch while he found me one of his old t-shirts to sleep in. Before he went back downstairs, he stopped in Felix's doorway. We both looked at the sleeping child, his face peaceful in the glow of his nightlight. I'll make sure he's okay, Dominic whispered, no matter what it takes. He's not going to grow up confused about who loves him or who he can trust. I know you will. You're a wonderful father. I learned from the best, he said, and kissed my cheek before heading downstairs. I stood there for a few more minutes, watching my grandson sleep, thinking about how close I'd come to losing access to this, to him, to these quiet moments of unconditional love. Gemma had almost succeeded in destroying everything that mattered, but she hadn't. And that made all the difference. I didn't sleep well that night. I lay in Dominic and Gemma's bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. The room still smelled like her perfume, that expensive scent she wore constantly. Her skincare products were lined up on the dresser, her clothes hung in the closet. It felt wrong to be here, in this space that had been hers. But Dominic was right. He couldn't sleep here tonight, not after what she'd done. Around 3 a.m, I heard Felix crying. I got up and went to his room, finding him sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his face. Grandma? Where's Mommy? My heart broke. I sat on the edge of his bed and pulled him into my lap. Mommy had to go stay somewhere else for a little while, sweetheart. Why? Did I do something bad? No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups have problems they need to work out, and Mommy and Daddy need some time to figure things out. But she'll come back, right? She'll come back and read me stories? I didn't know how to answer that. I didn't know what Dominic planned to tell him, how much a 3-year-old could understand about his parents' marriage falling apart. So I just held him and rocked him gently. Your daddy and I are here. We love you so much, and no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. I promise. He fell back asleep eventually, and I stayed there in his room, watching him breathe, protecting him in the only way I could. When dawn finally came, I went downstairs and found Dominic already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open and his phone beside him. I've been researching divorce attorneys, he said without looking up. Apparently, I need someone who specializes in high-conflict divorces involving child custody. Miles can recommend someone excellent. He has connections throughout the legal community. I'd appreciate that. He finally looked at me, and I could see he hadn't slept either. She's been texting me all night. First she was apologizing, begging me to let her come home so we could talk. Then she got angry, saying you've poisoned me against her. Then back to apologizing. It's been cycling like that for hours. You haven't responded? No. I don't trust myself to say anything that won't make things worse. And honestly, I don't know what there is to say. She lied to me about debt. She opened credit cards in my name. She was planning to manipulate and record my mother to isolate me from my family. What response is appropriate for that? I made coffee, while Dominic continued scrolling through attorney websites. Felix woke up around 7 and came downstairs asking for pancakes. Dominic made them, going through the motions of normal Saturday morning routine, even though nothing was normal anymore. Felix asked twice where Mommy was, and each time Dominic just said she'd be back soon, not ready yet to have the bigger conversation. Around 9, there was a knock at the door. Dominic went to answer it, and I heard Gemma's voice from the entryway, high-pitched and desperate. Please, Dominic, just let me come in. Let me talk to you. We can work this out. There's nothing to work out right now, Gemma. You need to give me space. Space? You've had all night to think about this. Don't I deserve a chance to explain my side? I stayed in the kitchen with Felix, trying to distract him with his pancakes, but I could hear every word. Your side? Dominic's voice was cold. What side is there? You investigated my mother behind my back. You planned to record and manipulate her. You hid massive debt from me. You opened accounts in my name without permission. What explanation makes any of that okay? I was trying to protect us. Your mother has too much control over our lives, Dominic. Can't you see that? Every decision we make, We have to consider what Linnea will think, what Linnea will say, whether Linnea will approve. I was trying to free us from that. By stealing from me? By scheming to cut my mother out of my life? I wasn't stealing. Those credit cards were for household expenses, for Felix's needs, for building my business that benefits our whole family. And I wasn't trying to cut Linnea out. I was trying to establish healthy boundaries. By recording her without consent? By trying to provoke her into an outburst you could use against her? That's not healthy boundaries, Gemma. That's psychological warfare. There was a long pause. Then Gemma's voice changed, became softer, more manipulative. Baby, please. Think about Felix. Think about our family. Don't let your mother destroy what we've built together. You destroyed it, Dominic said flatly. You destroyed it the moment you decided lying and manipulation were acceptable ways to get what you wanted. She's turned you against me. Can't you see? This is exactly what Linnea wanted. She never liked me. She never thought I was good enough for you. And now she's finally got what she wanted. Me out of the picture so she can have you all to herself. I closed my eyes, listening to her try to flip the narrative one more time. Even caught, even exposed, she was still trying to make me the villain. Stop, Dominic said. Just stop. My mother didn't turn me against you. You did that yourself. Every lie, every manipulation, every scheme. You did this, Gemma. Own it. Fine, fine. You want me to own it? I'll own it. Yes, I investigated your mother's finances because I had a right to know what was happening with money that should come to our family. Yes, I was planning to record that dinner because I needed proof of how she treats me. Yes, I have debt, but that's because I've been trying to build something to contribute to our household in my own way. And yes, I think your mother gives away too much money to strangers instead of taking care of her actual family. If that makes me a bad person, then I guess I'm a bad person. It doesn't make you a bad person, Dominic said, and his voice was sad now rather than angry. It makes you someone I don't know. Someone I'm not sure I ever really knew. You know me. You love me. We have a son together, Dominic. You can't just throw that away because of one bad night. One bad night? Gemma, you've been planning this for months. You've been poisoning my relationship with my mother for months. You've been lying about debt for God knows how long. This isn't one bad night. This is a pattern of deception that I only just discovered. Then let me make it right. Let me prove I can change. Please, Dominic, I'm begging you. Don't give up on us. From the kitchen, I heard Felix say, Mommy's here. I want to see Mommy. He jumped down from his chair and ran toward the entryway before I could stop him. I followed, finding him wrapped around Gemma's legs while she knelt down and held him tight, tears streaming down her face. My baby, she whispered. Mommy missed you so much. Where did you go? Why didn't you say goodbye? I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. Gemma looked up at Dominic, and I could see her calculating even now, using Felix as leverage. Please, at least let me spend some time with my son. Whatever issues you and I have, Felix shouldn't suffer for them. Dominic's face was torn. I could see him struggling between his anger at Gemma and his desire to protect Felix from unnecessary pain. You can stay for a few hours, spend time with him, but then we need to talk, just the two of us, about how this is going to work going forward. Gemma nodded quickly, wiping her eyes. Yes, okay, thank you. She took Felix into the living room, and I heard her asking him about his week, about preschool, her voice overly bright and cheerful. Dominic pulled me aside in the hallway. I'm going to call Miles now. Get the name of that divorce attorney. I want to file papers Monday morning before she has time to strategize. That's smart, I said. The sooner you establish legal boundaries, the better. Will you stay? I don't want to leave you alone with her, and I need to make these calls. Of course. I went back to the kitchen and continued cleaning up from breakfast while Dominic went upstairs to his office. I could hear Gemma and Felix in the living room, her reading him a story, both of them laughing. It was such a normal sound, such a picture of maternal love, that it was hard to reconcile with the woman who'd been scheming to destroy me just yesterday. About an hour later, Gemma appeared in the kitchen doorway. Felix was watching cartoons in the living room. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Anger, yes. Resentment, definitely. But also something that might have been respect or recognition. You won, she said simply. I dried my hands on a dish towel and turned to face her. This wasn't a competition, Gemma. Wasn't it? From the moment I met Dominic, we've been competing for him. For his attention, his loyalty, his love. I'm his mother. You're his wife. Those are different relationships. They shouldn't be in competition. But they are when the mother won't let go. When she keeps inserting herself into every aspect of her adult son's life. I took a breath, trying to stay calm. I never tried to control Dominic's life. I tried to support it. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, support that comes with a price tag feels a lot like control. I never asked for anything in return for the house, for Felix's school, for any of it. You didn't have to ask. The debt was implied, the obligation. The expectation that we'd always include you, always consider you, always make you a priority in our lives. That's what families do, Gemma. They include each other. They consider each other. That's not manipulation. That's love. She laughed bitterly. Love? You want to talk about love? You raised a son who's so emotionally dependent on you that he can't make major decisions without wondering what you'll think. That's not love, Linnea. That's enmeshment. Dominic is not dependent on me. He's a successful, independent adult with his own career and his own family. A family that lives in a house you bought. A son who goes to a school you pay for. A life that's funded by your money. How is that independent? Those were gifts, not strings. Everything has strings, Linnea. Maybe not ones you consciously attached, but they're there. And I was trying to cut them so we could actually build our own life. By lying? By scheming? By trying to manipulate me into looking unstable so you could justify cutting me out entirely? Gemma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I did what I thought I had to do. Maybe I went too far. Maybe I made mistakes. But my motivation was real. I genuinely believe Dominic needs distance from you to become his own person. Or maybe you need distance from me because I'm the only thing standing between you and complete control over my son and his money. Her eyes flashed. Not everything is about money. No? Then why did you investigate my finances? Why did you consult an attorney about my estate planning? Why were you so focused on the 40% I'm leaving to charity if this wasn't about money? Because it's not fair. Thomas was Dominic's father. That money, that legacy, it should stay in the family, not go to strangers who meant nothing to your husband. Thomas specifically wanted to help students who couldn't afford their education. We discussed it many times. I'm honoring his wishes. You're honoring what you think his wishes were. But he's dead, Linnea. He doesn't get a vote anymore, and the living should take priority over the dead. I stared at her, at this woman who'd married my son and born my grandson, and I felt nothing but sadness. You really don't understand, do you? This was never about choosing between the living and the dead. It was about honoring a good man's legacy while also taking care of my family. Dominic will inherit millions, Gemma. Millions. More money than most people see in a lifetime. But that's not enough for you because you wanted it all. I wanted security. I wanted to know that my son would be taken care of, that our future was solid. Is that so wrong? No. But the way you went about it was. You could have talked to me. You could have expressed your concerns honestly. Instead, you lied and manipulated and tried to destroy my relationship with my son. That's what's wrong, Gemma. Not your desire for security, but your willingness to hurt people to get it. She looked away, and for just a moment, I saw something real in her expression. Shame, maybe, or regret. I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't want Felix to grow up in a broken home. Then you should have thought about that before you opened credit cards in your husband's name and planned to record his mother for your manipulation scheme. I know, she whispered. I know I messed up, but is there really no way back from this? No way to fix it? That's not for me to decide. That's between you and Dominic. But you'll tell him to divorce me. You'll encourage him to cut me out completely. No, I said, and I meant it. I'll tell him to do whatever he thinks is right for himself and for Felix. Whether that means therapy and reconciliation or divorce and co-parenting, that's his choice to make. I won't interfere. You say that now, but I say that now, and I'll say it later. I don't want to control Dominic's life, Gemma. I never did. I just wanted to be part of it. You were the one who saw that as a threat. She was crying now, mascara running down her face again. I've lost everything, haven't I? My marriage, my home, my family. All because I wanted financial security. You lost it because you tried to get security through deception, rather than honesty. And because you saw love as something that could be manipulated, rather than something that should be nurtured. Dominic came downstairs then, his face set. Gemma, I've talked to an attorney. We need to discuss custody arrangements and you moving out permanently. Felix can stay here with me for now, and we'll work out a visitation schedule. Gemma's face crumpled. Dominic, please, this is how it has to be, at least for now. Maybe someday we can figure out some kind of co-parenting arrangement, but right now, I need space and time to process everything, and I need to protect Felix from the conflict. She nodded slowly, then went to the living room to say goodbye to Felix. I heard her promising him she'd see him soon, heard Felix asking when she'd be back, heard her voice breaking as she tried to reassure him. Then she was gone, walking out the door of the house I'd bought for them, leaving behind the life she'd tried so hard to control. Dominic came to stand beside me. We watched through the window as she got into her car and drove away. It's really over, he said quietly. Yes, I agreed. It is. I don't know how to feel. Relieved, sad, angry, all of it at once? All of it at once is normal. You're allowed to grieve, even when you're the one who made the decision to end things. Felix came running in, his face confused and worried. Is Mommy coming back for dinner? Dominic picked him up and held him close. No, buddy. Mommy is going to live in a different house for a while. But you'll see her lots, okay? This doesn't mean she doesn't love you. But I want her here. I know you do. And that's okay. It's okay to miss her and be sad about this. I watched my son comfort my grandson, watched him navigate this impossible situation with grace and honesty, and I felt proud. Proud that despite everything, despite the pain and betrayal, he was prioritizing Felix's emotional well-being. That's what good parents did, and that's what I'd tried to do all along. Protect my family, not control them, not manipulate them, but simply love them and keep them safe. The climax had passed. The confrontation was over. Now came the hard part, rebuilding and moving forward. But at least we'd be doing it together, without lies or schemes standing between us. That was worth everything. 3 months passed before I truly understood what the aftermath of that terrible dinner would look like. 3 months of Dominic navigating divorce proceedings, of Felix adjusting to his new reality, of our family slowly rebuilding itself on a foundation of honesty instead of manipulation. Dominic filed for divorce that following Monday, just as he'd promised. Gemma contested it initially, hired an aggressive attorney who tried to paint her as the wronged party, the devoted wife and mother being cast aside by a man under his controlling mother's influence. But the evidence was overwhelming. The credit card fraud, the private investigators' reports, the recording of her planning to manipulate me. Her attorney advised her to settle rather than go to trial, where all of this would become public record. The settlement took 6 weeks to negotiate. Gemma got limited custody, every other weekend and 1 evening per week with Felix. She got none of the house, since I'd purchased it outright, and the deed was in my name with Dominic as the sole beneficiary. She got a modest spousal support payment for 2 years, enough to get her back on her feet, but nothing like the lifestyle she'd been trying to maintain. And she got to keep her credit card debt, all $67,000 of it, with the stipulation that Dominic was not responsible for any of it. I paid for Dominic's legal fees. He protested at first, said he needed to handle this himself, but I reminded him that fighting Gemma's aggressive attorney would have bankrupted him. He finally accepted, and I was grateful I could help him through this without adding financial stress to his emotional burden. The house felt too painful for him to stay in, too full of memories and broken promises. So I helped him find a beautiful 3-bedroom apartment just 4 blocks from my place on the Upper East Side. It had a doorman and a small balcony and a 2nd bedroom perfect for Felix. We moved him in 6 weeks after Gemma left, and I watched my son start to rebuild his life in a space that was entirely his own, unmarked by her presence. Felix struggled at first. He cried for his mother frequently those first few weeks. He asked questions Dominic didn't always know how to answer. Why did Mommy leave? Why can't we all live together? Did he do something wrong to make Mommy go away? Dominic got him into play therapy with a child psychologist who specialized in divorce and family transitions. Slowly, Felix began to understand that sometimes grown-ups can't live together anymore, but that didn't mean either parent loved him any less. I saw Felix 4 or 5 times a week now. We had breakfast together on Wednesday mornings before his preschool. I picked him up on Friday afternoons, and we'd go to the park or the children's museum, or sometimes just back to my apartment where he'd play with the toy box I kept for him. Sunday dinners became our tradition, the 3 of us together, sometimes cooking, sometimes ordering in, just being a family. Dominic and I talked more than we had in years. Real conversations about his feelings, his fears, his hopes for the future. He told me how isolated he'd felt during his marriage, how Gemma had gradually convinced him that sharing things with me was disloyal to her. He told me about the subtle ways she'd undermined his confidence, made him doubt his own judgment, created dependency on her approval. It was textbook emotional abuse, his therapist had told him, and recognizing it was the first step in healing from it. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said to me one Sunday evening after we'd put Felix to bed. We were sitting on his new couch, drinking wine, talking the way we used to before Gemma entered our lives. "I'm sorry I let her come between us. I'm sorry I doubted you." "You don't have to keep apologizing," I said gently. "You were manipulated by someone you loved and trusted. That's not a character flaw. That's being human. But I should have been smarter. I should have seen through her. She was very good at what she did, and you wanted to believe in your marriage, in your family. There's nothing wrong with that. I just keep thinking about all the time I wasted, all the lunches I canceled, all the phone calls I cut short, all the times I chose her narrative over my own instincts. I let you suffer because I was too blind to see what was happening. But you see it now. And we're here now, together, stronger than we were before. That's what matters." He leaned his head on my shoulder, and I stroked his hair the way I used to when he was small. My boy. My son who'd been hurt and betrayed, but who was healing, who was becoming whole again. As for Gemma, I heard updates through Dominic. She'd moved back in with her mother in New Jersey. Her Instagram following had dropped significantly once she stopped posting her perfect life content. She'd gotten a job as a sales associate at a wellness boutique, something to pay the bills, while she figured out her next move. She showed up for her scheduled visitations with Felix, though Dominic said she often seemed distracted during them, more focused on her phone than on their son. Part of me felt sorry for her. She'd gambled everything on a scheme that backfired spectacularly, and now she was living with the consequences. But mostly I felt relief that she was no longer in a position to hurt my family. The estate planning that had started all of this finally got completed. I sat down with Dominic and walked him through everything. The 60% he'd inherit, held in trust until he was 40. The 40% going to the Thomas Westbrook Educational Foundation, which would provide full scholarships to architecture students from low-income families. Dominic cried when I showed him the mission statement, said his father would have loved it. "You know," he said, "Gemma was wrong about this. She saw it as you taking something away from our family. But really, you're extending our family. Every kid who gets a scholarship because of Dad's legacy, they become part of our story. That's beautiful, Mom. That's exactly right." I also updated my will to include specific provisions for Felix. A trust fund that would be untouchable by either parent, designated solely for his education and his future. I wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, my grandson would be taken care of without anyone being able to use that money as leverage or control. Miles Drummond, who'd saved me with that phone call 3 months ago, became a friend rather than just an attorney. He joined us for some of our Sunday dinners, and I enjoyed his company. He was kind and thoughtful and had no agenda beyond genuine care for my well-being. I wasn't ready for romance, might never be ready after Thomas, but having a friend who understood the complexities of my situation was comforting. One Saturday afternoon in late spring, 4 months after that catastrophic dinner, I was at the park with Felix. He was on the swings, pumping his little legs, shouting for me to watch how high he could go. The sun was warm, the trees were blooming, and for the first time since Thomas died 6 years ago, I felt something close to peace. My phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. "Told the senior partners at work about the divorce. They were supportive. I think I'm finally ready to stop hiding what happened and just live my life honestly." I smiled and texted back, "Proud of you. See you for dinner tonight?" Wouldn't miss it. Felix wants to make cookies. Perfect. I'll get ingredients. I put my phone away and watched my grandson swing higher, his laughter carrying on the spring breeze. This was what family was supposed to be. Not perfect, not without pain or complications, but honest, present, built on love rather than manipulation. Gemma had tried to destroy this. She'd tried to isolate me, to turn my son against me, to claim what wasn't hers to claim. But she'd failed, because truth is stronger than lies, and love is stronger than schemes. I'd learned something through all of this, that generosity without boundaries could become vulnerability, that trusting people didn't mean ignoring red flags, that protecting my family sometimes meant standing up and fighting rather than stepping back and accommodating. I'd learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could face manipulation and betrayal and come out the other side intact. But most importantly, I'd learned that the relationship between a mother and son, when built on genuine love and respect, could survive almost anything. Dominic and I had been tested, pushed to our limits, nearly broken apart, but we'd held on. We'd fought for each other, and now we were building something even better than what we'd had before. Felix called out, "Grandma, watch this," and jumped off the swing at the peak of its arc, landing in the sand with a triumphant laugh. I applauded. "That was amazing, sweetheart." He ran over and threw his arms around my legs. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, Felix, so much." That evening, the three of us made cookies in Dominic's kitchen. Chocolate chip, Thomas's favorite. Felix got more flour on himself than in the bowl, and Dominic laughed more freely than I'd heard him laugh in years. We ate warm cookies with cold milk and watched a movie cuddled on the couch, Felix falling asleep between us. As I carried my sleeping grandson to his bedroom and tucked him in, kissing his forehead the way I used to kiss Dominic's when he was this age, I felt overwhelming gratitude. Gratitude for Miles's warning that had prevented me from walking blindly into Gemma's trap. Gratitude for the paralegal who'd risked her job to expose the truth. Gratitude for my own strength in staying calm when everything in me wanted to explode. Gratitude for Dominic's courage in choosing honesty over comfort. This was our resolution. Not a fairy tale ending where everything was perfect, but a real ending where we'd survived, learned, grown, and come back together stronger. I walked back to the living room where Dominic was cleaning up cookie crumbs. He looked up and smiled. "Thanks for tonight, Mom. For everything, really. For not giving up on us." "Never," I said. "I'll never give up on you." And I meant it. Because that's what mothers do. We protect, we fight, we love unconditionally. And when someone tries to come between us and our children, we stand our ground. Gemma had learned that the hard way. And now, finally, we could all move forward. The story that had started with a desperate phone call and a manipulative dinner party ended here, in a small apartment 4 blocks from mine, with my son and grandson safe, our family bonds restored, and the future stretching out before us, full of possibility and hope. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.